Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer. I'm continuing my walk along the Sussex border, and last time I was in East Preston and I've moved along a bit. It's another coastline. There'll be quite a bit of these coastlines, I suspect, until we start going north, but each one slightly different, although here we're still on shingle. But we have travelled, I'm not quite sure really how far we've travelled from Worthing, but sufficient now. Sufficient for me to be in an area that I'm not terribly familiar with. I'm in Rustington, so I've moved along a little west. And because I'm putting these videos out as often and as frequently as I can, I don't have all the time to do as much research as I would like. And also, I'm not trying to be a historian, I'm trying to be more of an explorer. So that's what I'm really going to be doing more of. Although in this video today, I'm on a little bit of a mission, but more of that later. If you've got the money, why not live down by the coast? Access to the sea here is quite easy. But if you want a sea view, it's going to cost you a fair bit, I don't suppose. Or I do suppose even. Now, I'm coming up this road, and again, I'm not too familiar with the names of the places here, but it's a good mile, I would say, up to the actual town of Rustington, which is one of the things I want to have a look at. Because Lee Lawson sent me a photograph of her great-great-grandfather. I think before I mentioned him as his great-great-great-grandfather, but it's semantics really when it's that old. There's another connection with him, who was born at Jupp's barn in Goring with Rustington. So that's my mission on this show, but also just to have a little look around as well. Well, it seems to me, just like around East Preston, Kingston, Gorse and that sort of area, if you've got access to the sea, there's always going to be those areas which are even more exclusive than perhaps the public areas. And I notice there's a private estate here as well. But as you get in, up nearer the town, and I haven't really consulted old maps on this one, which is a bit remiss of me, we'll start to see perhaps the older properties, some flint properties from who knows when, the 18th century sometime, when farming was much more prevalent in this area. And also the port of call that I'm looking for. Of course, the town is, or the main high street, it seems to me, it seems to be very modern. Looks like it's, just judging from the buildings here, developed in the 60s, I would think. Something like that. I'd be interested, I must have another look on old maps to find out if there was a high street here beforehand, or if this was just completely new. There are a couple of lovely old buildings, but certainly not in this bit. And interestingly, as I film this, it's the first day after the lockdown that we've had, the second lockdown, and now we're into these tiers. So down here we're in tier 2, and it's the first time that smaller shops have been able to open up again. So I imagine there's going to be a bit of a purge in all the towns and villages where people can get out and support their local shops, and that's a good thing. I see a parade of shops here, Victorian looking buildings, which I have to say, with the hoardings and the plate glass frontages do look ghastly, but certainly signs of an earlier heritage here from the mid 1800s, I suppose. And then on the other side of the road we've got some very beautiful old houses. Terrific. They look Georgian with their windows again. You can always tell the two periods apart from the Victorian manufactured red bricks that was being manufactured and sent out on the trains because of the new mode of transport, and then the older properties like this one, the coach house, which is just behind me, which you can see has been adorned with pebbles from the beach. And these older houses set in a much more rustic time when there wasn't the rumble of cars and lorries going past. It says on the plaque on this house, National School, AD 1859. And it's a reminder actually at the beginning of those early days of schooling for every child. When you think in the old days, the old rural labourer was basically taught by their fathers or their mothers, the kids of, that is, and the luckier ones would have some very basic education. And then we saw the church in the 1800s making a big effort in order to educate the masses, and it was important. This is now Rustington Parish Church Hall, I notice, but at one time a school, and appropriately it's next to the church, St. Peter's and Paul's. So let's have a quick look at that. I'm afraid to say I don't know too much about this church, or anything about the church really, just what I can observe. It's obviously got a south aisle here, which I'm walking past, but beautiful flint work. It looks like the Rustington people must have been, when they modified the church, as they probably did in the 19th century, were very proud of their church and spent a lot of time improving the look of it, because when you compare the flint and the knapping on the front here and how well that's done to the tower, which clearly is much older, and I'm going to hazard a guess at about, I don't know, 15th century or something like that, because a lot of towers were added around the 15th century, though it could be older. This is obviously more sandstone and a little bit of pebbles and flint just in the render. I'm wondering also whether above there was a spire at one point. So many churches in the land, certainly in the Saxon times, had spires, but many of them had gone by the Middle Ages. So it's difficult to know whether this one had one or not, but I'm just noticing now 1667. I think there's an attachment on the top. If you look very carefully, you can see that there's an added bit on the top of the tower there, and they put the date in, which presumably is goes up above what was there before. So interesting, have to look that up at some point. If anybody knows, you can stick it in the comments. Right, the next port of call, and my real final destination I suppose, is diagonally opposite the church is, I believe, the old manor house, and behind that, or part of that at one time, was a farm. And it's here that we have a photograph sent in by viewer Lee Lawson, because her great-great-grandfather George Gates, who was born in Goring at Jupp's farm that we saw in a previous video, went to work in Rustington, and it must have been about 1910, because well, in 1910 this photograph was taken at the gates of the old, slightly crumbling manor house here. So let's go and have a look at it and see where George, who's featured in the photograph on the left hand side, was standing, and how much has changed. It's a private house now, but there was a manor house and a farm, and I believe the manor house was in a bit of a dilapidated state, and so the farm let his farm labourers live here. It's slightly changed because it's been modernised. At one point, I think it was a private club or something like that. It's now a house, and there used to be a wall that came around here and a wall on the other side, so this is all somewhat different. But Edwin Allen, who was a photographer of Rustington at the turn of the century, of the 20th century, he was taking pictures and views of Rustington, and one happened to feature the old manor house, and there was George Gates leaning on the wall. As I say, as you look at it, he's on the left hand side. There's a little bit of confusion about who the other chap is. There's some possible ones, so let's not confuse any of that. So George would have been standing, I'm guessing, probably where I am about now, leaning in a very rural and presumably quite a quiet little environment here. But if I turn the camera around and show you the other side, it's a very noisy junction now. Actually, now the traffic has just quietened down for a second. If you look here, I think is the remnant of the actual wall that George Gates was leaning on at the front here. So although it has disappeared pretty much mostly, some of it's still here. So that's really reassuring to see. So yeah, lovely house. Hard to believe that at one point this was just tumbling down and farmers or farm labourers were living in it. And now, of course, it's probably very exclusive and lovely inside. Well, it's very nice to see the independent shops able to open once again. And let's hope that they stay open up until Christmas. Well, that's been it for my walk today around Rustington. Sorry about the noise of the traffic, but it's certainly a lot busier than it used to be when it was full of farm labourers going about their business. Anyway, in the meantime, don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Become a patron, support what I do, help me put diesel, into my van, and I will continue to bring you some of these heritage, landscape and nature videos as I make my way along the Sussex border. Till next time, bye bye.